2 wins in their last 3 games has us wondering, can Wrexham maintain this decent run of form, put their poor start to the season behind them and start challenging further up the table? Now, a few things to look out here. Firstly, I think you have to start with the performances themselves in the last 3 games. Beating Norwich 3-2, this is in the league, last time out, was obviously a bit of a statement of intent. It was the second consecutive away game that they'd won. And looking at the numbers, looking at the stats from the game, it doesn't look the most sustainable blueprint for success, because even though Wrexham scored 2 goals, even though Josh Windass looked incredibly lively on the day, it was still a case of being outshot, of the XG only totalling on 1.3. And as we've discussed on these videos previously, the issue for Wrexham so far this season has been defensively, and they conceded 14 shots, they conceded 4 big chances, but crucially conceded 2.34 expected goals. Now, I would caveat this a little bit by pointing out that quite a big chunk of the XG that they conceded came late in the game, came when they were already 3-1 up. Jovan Makama missed a massive chance with a header with 10 minutes to go, and then it was him that scored in the 94th minute. So in some sense, you can kind of write off a little bit of that in terms of the underlying numbers against them. The 2-0 win over Millwall, a bit of a similar story. Yes, of course, they won the game 2-0. They kept a clean sheet, but Millwall had 21 shots in the game, totaling 1.96 XG. So I wouldn't necessarily say the blueprint for success was shown in the performances, even if they did score 5 goals and even if they did keep a clean sheet in one of those games. And then the 3-1 defeat at home to QPR in between those was another case of struggling from a defensive point of view, but again, looking very good going forward. And that seems to be the case for Wrexham at the moment. Carrying a constant attacking threat regardless of personnel, but when it comes to the defensive side of things, really unable to stop the opponents from creating big chances. And even though we've seen Danny Ward come out the side due to injury, Okonkwo hasn't had a great time of things and made a mistake in the Norwich game too. But that's the negative side of things, right? It's that so far maybe we're not seeing a massive shift in performance, even if we are seeing better results. The thing to focus on maybe though is personnel, and this is where things could be quite exciting for Wrexham, because they made a lot of changes over the course of the window, and we saw some changes in the starting lineup against Norwich. Kaboré came in and started at right wing back and looked incredibly exciting. He got 2 assists playing that right wing back role. He looks like he's going to give Wrexham a completely different dimension down that right hand side. A player who was good for Luton in the Premier League a couple of seasons ago. A big coup to get him in. I think he'll be a big player for them. But again, Wrexham haven't had that many issues from a attacking perspective, and Kaboré isn't necessarily going to be someone who tightens them up defensively. The person who could and should do that is Dominic Hyam. Now, he came in for Connor Cody in the starting lineup here at Carrow Road on Saturday, and as I said, Norwich did create some chances, but they came late in the game, and Hyam for the most part was really solid, and I think he's a much better fit for what Wrexham want to do defensively, in terms of having somebody who is much more of a defender first rather than the distributor that we see from for the most part from Cody, who in my mind has struggled early on in his time at Wrexham. Callum Doyle, playing left-sided centre-back, came off at half-time and was replaced by Cleworth, so we'll have to see what happens there. But I do think that Hyam coming in is going to provide much more defensive steel and should make Wrexham a tougher nut to crack. And then Ben Sheaf came in and played 66 minutes in midfield, and again, he's someone whose distribution for midfield should be important, but also he's a really good defensive midfield player. He's someone who isn't just a distributor, not just competent on the ball, but can get around the park well, and him returning to full fitness should be a massive plus for them, not to mention Windass's form coming back into the side and scoring 2 goals. So the team is looking better on paper than it was even a couple of weeks ago, and that should give Wrexham fans hope. Then you look at the fixture list. The 3-2 win at Norwich against a Norwich side who've really struggled at home, a 2-0 win over Millwall, a side who've really struggled at home, who got their first home win of the season on Monday night, 1-0 against Watford. The next league game is a home game against Derby, who for me so far this season have been one of the poorer teams in the league. There's also the visit of Oxford, who got their first win of the season on Sunday back in later October. But apart from those 2 games, it is Leicester away, it's Birmingham at home, it's Stoke away, it's Middlesbrough away. Now, in Leicester and Birmingham, we've got two of the fancy sides at the start of the season. Leicester still without a points deduction and have started the season well. Birmingham have looked really good at times and not quite so good at others, but I think we can be pretty confident in what looks a fairly tame renewal of the Championship. These should be two pretty good sides challenging for the top six. Stoke and Borough weren't necessarily expected to be two of the better sides of the season so far, but that is exactly what they've been, and Borough top the table. Stoke not all that far behind them in terms of their really good start. So it's not the easiest run of games coming up. Now, that isn't necessarily the worst thing for Wrexham if they want to find out where exactly they are, because right now, depending who you speak to, I know there are some people who, and I'd probably count myself in this, who'd be much more concerned about Wrexham fighting towards the bottom end of the table than the top, given the issues defensively. But at the same time, there's no denying that in terms of the quality and star players they've got and the squad quality, the amount of money spent on the team, if they can put a run of results together, then the ambition and the expectation will be there for them to challenge at the top end. You know, Wrexham do feel like a side that could finish basically anywhere between 1st and 24th this season. In my mind, it's still more likely to be towards the bottom end. I need to see a side who are better at stopping the opposition from getting into good positions in games. But the personnel and the team does it better. Really excited about Kaboré, Sheaf and Hyam, and it wouldn't be a surprise to me if we do see an improvement in performances over the next few weeks.